opening statements here today and then recess for the floor vote. We will quickly reconvene after the vote and begin with witness testimony. Also, without objection, the hearing record will remain open for 5 legislative days, so members may submit any materials they wish to be included therein. Thank you, Ranking Member Sewell, members of the committee, and our witnesses for participating in today's hearing. Recent elections have produced record high turnout, and in turn, those elections become the most challenging for elections officials to administrate and process. Presidential, primary, general, and special elections occur around the clock across states, requiring efficient administration to provide Americans with free and fair elections. As a former Secretary of State, I am glad to welcome our witnesses today for an important review of our nation's most recent presidential election. Voters across America went to the polls in record high numbers in 2024 to exercise one of their most fundamental rights. According to our Constitution, the states are responsible for prescribing the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives. The role of Congress in elections is to provide oversight and to support states in those efforts. The purpose of our hearing today is to revisit the 2024 election and hear from secretaries of state who conducted their states' elections this past November. Specifically, we will be looking at what went well and what lessons we can learn from each of the secretaries in administering free and fair elections, and how we can continue to protect and promote voter confidence. I thank all of our witnesses for coming before the committee today to share your knowledge and expertise on this matter. During the 2024 election cycle, over 155 million Americans cast their ballots in races for the White House, the Senate, the House of Representatives, governors' mansions, state legislatures, state Supreme Courts, and more. Even with record high turnout, many states were able to report their results on election night for the presidency. However, some states were significantly delayed in calling races for the Senate and the House of Representatives for days, and in some cases, weeks. Something I was very proud of as Florida's former chief elections official was how quickly our state was able to call elections with confidence in our results. Undoubtedly, states with laws on the books for pre-processing of mail-in ballots, regularly enforced deadlines for receipt on election day, and consistent post-election audits of voter rolls are in the best position to administer their elections without undue delay and to report results on election night, which helps instill voter confidence. Many states across the country, including most of the states the secretaries here today represent, have taken initiative in enhancing their election security laws. When Americans feel their vote will count, they are more inclined to take the time to cast a ballot. Americans must know that their vote will not be misplaced, damaged, or otherwise interfered with, but instead it will be counted in a timely manner. Americans must also know that non-citizens' votes will not cancel out a legal vote. Strengthening our voting laws increases voter confidence and leads to higher turnout in our elections. This most recent election was proof of that. In Alabama, Louisiana, Idaho, and Ohio, successful election integrity measures have been implemented. Each of these states are evidence of how enhancing election integrity and security can help to manage high voter turnout, voter access, and the rapid process of ballots to certify results on election night. While states are the primary authority on how elections are conducted, it is our role here in Congress to assist in any way that we can. One way we will be able to help provide resources to states is by passing the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility, or the SAVE Act. This bill would bring critical reform to the National Voter Registration Act that would help prevent non-citizens from being added to voter rolls. It would also provide states with free access to the DHS SAVE program and the Social Security Death Database, which will help states remove non-citizens or deceased persons who should not be on their voter rolls. In doing so, the SAVE Act would codify many of the measures included in President Trump's recent executive order to strengthen election integrity and security. Running a successful and uneventful election is no easy task. I am looking forward to learning from each of you about how you successfully ran elections in each of your states in 2024 and how Congress can assist in future elections. Thank you for being here today, and I look forward to our conversation. With that, I yield to Ranking Member Sewell for an opening statement.
Good afternoon, everyone. As a ranking member of the Election Subcommittee and as a representative of Alabama's Civil Rights District, there is nothing more important to me than ensuring that every American can cast their ballot. It was in my hometown of Selma, Alabama, 60 years ago, where John Lewis and hundreds of foot soldiers were bludgeoned on the Edmund Pettus Bridge for the equal right of all Americans to vote. However, for the past decade, extremists have fought to undo the hard-won progress that the foot soldiers sought to achieve. Just last year, lawmakers in 40 states introduced 317 bills to eradicate new barriers to the ballot box. Since his defeat in the 2020 election, Donald Trump and his Republican allies have pushed the big lie of a stolen election. They have even tried to convince the American people of the lie that non-citizens are voting in large numbers and are threatening our elections. And now they are using the lie as an excuse to pass new laws like the SAVE Act that would make it harder for millions of Americans to vote. Moreover, Donald Trump just signed an executive order that would not only give him unilateral authority to regulate federal elections, but it would open the floodgates for mass voter purges and give Elon Musk unfettered access to sensitive voter files. The executive order and the SAVE Act also create unnecessary barriers for election workers by withholding funds and threatening election administrators with 5 years of prison sentence if they make a simple mistake while trying to register new voters. Even though the 2024 election was fair and secure, it was marred with threats of violence, like the bomb threats that targeted polling stations, election offices, and tabulation centers on Election Day. However, today's hearing should present a great learning opportunity because states like Connecticut are leading the charge to expand access to the ballot box. In 2023, Connecticut passed a state-level Voting Rights Act to expand voter access. Sadly, last year, Alabama, my home state, cared more about enacting laws to criminalize absentee ballot assistance and purge thousands of eligible voters from the rolls. Alabama is one of only 3 states in the nation that does not allow any form of early in-person voting. But in Connecticut, voters were allowed to exercise their their right to vote 14 days before Election Day. Before Election Day in Alabama, the courts had to prevent Alabama from unfairly and unlawfully removing thousands of eligible voters from the roll because they were wrongfully flagged as non-citizen in direct violation of the National Voter Registration Act. Voters in Alabama and every other state should not have fewer options to vote. What they deserve is to learn on Election Day that their names were actually on the rolls rightfully, not wrongfully, and purged unnecessarily. As we examine the 2024 election, what we should be addressing are issues such as chronic underfunding of our elections, the safety and security of our election workers, polling stations and voters, and expanding access to the ballot box for every eligible American. We should be honoring the legacy by passing legislation like the John Roberts Voting Rights Advancement Act, the Freedom to Vote Act, and the Native American Voting Rights Act. Trump has no regard for the U.S. Constitution, the rule of law, or the fundamental principles that all Americans, regardless of their race, creed, or color, has a right to have their voice heard at the ballot box. The American people's right to vote is sacred, as John Lewis said, and I would never stop fighting to protect the cornerstone of our democracy. We as elected officials should be looking for ways to expand access to the ballot box, not to curb it. I want to thank our secretaries for being here today. I also want to thank Chairwoman Lee for holding this. I look forward to hearing from all of you, and I would like to welcome my Secretary of State, Wes Allen. Thank you.
With that, I yield to Ranking Member of the full committee, Representative Morelli, for an opening statement.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairwoman Lee, for gathering the subcommittee, and thanks for giving me a few moments. And certainly thank you to the various Secretaries of State for being here today. As we gather this afternoon to revisit the 2024 election, it's important to state up front that the 2024 election was fair and secure, that Donald Trump was elected president. You see, unlike many on the other side of the aisle, Democrats can and will acknowledge that fact. Even when we don't personally like or agree with the outcome of an election, we honor the democratic process and accept the results. In examining the last election and looking for ways to improve our country's election administration, we must address the rampant spread of myths and disinformation and falsehoods that continue to be spread about our electoral system. We must protect election workers who face continued threats and harassment. We must address the rise of artificial intelligence, generative AI, and continued foreign influence campaigns that seek to affect and influence our elections. We must fully fund our elections. Federal elections are on the ballot in every state every 2 years, and yet Congress has continued and consistently failed to sufficiently fund those election efforts at the state and local level. Congress must halt and reverse the administration's harmful decisions to attack, undermine, and defund critical federal agencies and partnerships like the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, and the Elections Infrastructure Information Sharing and Analysis Center, or the FBI's Foreign Influence Task Force. These actions to cripple and undermine these agencies do not strengthen our elections. In fact, they make us less secure. We need to fix our broken special interest big money campaign finance system. Last year, one donor, billionaire Elon Musk, spent at least $291 million backing Donald Trump and other Republican candidates. According to Open Secrets, the top 6 donors in the United States gave over $100 million each during the 2024 election, all supporting the president and Republican candidates. In last week's Wisconsin Supreme Court election, Elon Musk and allied groups spent over $20 million. We also need fair maps. Look at North Carolina, where Republicans gerrymandered their way into the House majority by drawing 3 Democratic members out of their seats. The president's recent executive order on election integrity is a further assault on our democracy. The order is unlawful and unnecessary, attempting to impose documentary proof of citizenship requirements to register to vote by executive fiat, circumventing the United States Congress and our constitutional authority. It undermines the independence of the U.S. Election Assistance Commission and injects chaos and uncertainty into our voting system certification process. New York's Attorney General and a coalition of 18 other attorneys general are suing to stop President Trump's unconstitutional attempts to seize control of our elections. Voters and party committees have also sued to stop the White House from doing that. Alongside all of this is the so-called SAVE Act, a measure that my colleagues on the other side claim is necessary to prevent non-citizens from voting in U.S. elections. It's not. Non-citizens registering to vote is already a crime. Non-citizens voting is a crime and leads to immediate deportation. It rarely happens, and when it does, non-citizens are held accountable, as they should be. The SAVE Act and the President's order are 2 sides of the same coin. Now, with the economic pain of the President's chaotic tariffs just being felt, members of the majority are planning to charge millions of Americans potentially billions of dollars just to register to vote for the 150 million Americans who don't have passports. Last week, I testified before the Rules Committee that the SAVE Act and the executive order would disenfranchise women, rural voters, military voters, overseas voters, Native American voters, seniors, students, survivors of domestic abuse, and survivors of natural disasters, millions of Americans. There is, however, real work Congress can do to improve our elections. Election officials take on essential, often thankless tasks in running elections. They face increased threats and too little and inconsistent funding from Congress. That could stop. As ranking member of this committee and a member of the Appropriations Committee, I'll continue to push for additional funding and consistent elections funding. We can work to combat mis- and disinformation, to meet the challenges posed by AI, and to improve access to the ballot for every single American. Providing both support and accurate information will allow election workers to administer secure, accessible elections and give Americans the confidence in elections that they need. I was honored to join Ranking Member Sewell in her hometown of Selma for the 60th anniversary of Bloody Sunday just last month. We must honor the legacy and continue moving forward in the fight for voting rights, not backwards. So I'm anxious to hear from each of the secretaries today. Thank you for your work, for the work your staffs do, and all the election workers in your respective states to carry out these important elections. With that, Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity, and I yield back.
Without objection, all other members' opening statements will be made part of the hearing record if they are submitted to the committee clerk by 5 p.m. today. At this time, votes for members have been called. We will take a brief recess to go vote and then return as quickly as possible to the hearing room to hear the opening statements and testimony from our witnesses. At this time, this committee stands in a temporary recess.
You know, one thing we didn't make clear.